go inside, Chuck.
Okay. Thank you. Well, we've come out 50. That's,
50 is great.
Yeah.
It's a majority.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us. Once again, a majority of the Senate has spoken to professionalize our military justice system. I especially want to thank 5 senators, new senators who joined our bipartisan coalition. Senators Gardner, Kirk, Daines, Thune, and Peters all decided to hold the military accountable. But once again, the military brass is being protected by Senate filibuster rules. Here's what I know, and this is a question of when, not if. We are not going away. Sadly, the military will not fix this problem on their own. Our bipartisan coalition, including Senators Grassley, Blumenthal, Cruz, who have been the lead co-sponsors on this bill, will continue to fulfill our duty and demand a system that works for all the brave men and women in uniform. I want to thank Senators Enzi, Kirk, and Thune for their leadership. We are here to make sure and very clear that we will not end our fight to pass the Military Justice Improvement Act. I'm greatly encouraged that new senators who have just joined the chamber, like Senators Gardner, Peters, and Daines, looked at all the facts with open eyes and refused to let the Pentagon off the hook. Because the Pentagon spin machine continues to hope that those of us in Congress responsible for oversight will simply take their word for it that we are on the road to success and not scratch below the surface. After nearly 2 decades of inaction, they've promised to change. After several years of incremental reform and incremental progress, we have the facts. There is more work to be done before survivors trust the system and serial predators are taken out of uniform, a uniform that they do not deserve to wear, and are put behind bars where they belong. I continue to find inspiration in the survivors and families who have come forward to speak out against the way the military justice system has let them down. Whether they were ignored, disbelieved, or retaliated against, they were failed by the very institution they've devoted their lives to. It's because of this coalition standing here today and all of the brave service members who have come forward and told their stories that I know it is a question of when and not if this reform will actually become law. Because the Pentagon is failing in the mission, our Commander-in-Chief is failing in the mission, it's our solemn duty to ensure that sons and daughters who commit their lives to securing our freedoms are protected. It's inexcusable that Congress has given the Pentagon a pass. We are not here to serve as a rubber stamp for the military. This vote is over, but we are going back to our office to get ready for the next one. Now I'd like you to hear from my colleagues. Who's next up? Senator Grassley.
I think she set the tone when she said it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. And particularly with so many new senators and something to learn on this issue. And the rule of thumb that I have is that a culture of a bureaucracy isn't going to change from the inside. It's got to change from the outside. And Senator Gillibrand has worked real hard for several years now, at least 2 or 3 years on this issue. And it's going to finally come across to people that 20 years of promise that things are going to change in regard to this. It's, it's been a while since Tailhook, but nothing much has changed in this regard. And we've got to make sure that the military is a fighting unit where there is no enemies of each other within the unit. And I think this sexual harassment shows that not everybody has everybody else's back. So we're going to continue this fight, and hopefully with the closeness of the last 2 years and the majority in each case, we're going to win. But I think it's kind of a case like I remember Senator Proxmire, 1967, on the treaty on genocide. It took 19 years, but he gave a speech every day on that subject, and eventually won out. Eventually had a Republican president by the name of Reagan support it. And this is something that Senator Gillibrand and I and others need to speak out on a regular basis. And 12 months or less, you'll see a different result. and we will have a system that is fair to everybody because it's independent of the command.
Thank you. Senator Wyden.
Thank you, Senator Gillibrand, and I'm going to be brief. Senator Gillibrand is giving the Congress a chance to finally adopt a true zero-tolerance policy. Zero tolerance for a chain of command that has been unwilling or unable to get the job done. And the reality is, for decades now, we have been told that there would be a zero-tolerance policy and that the military would come through with that kind of commitment. And yet, for too often, that refrain has simply failed too many American men and women who sign up to defend this country. So the Congress didn't make this change this afternoon towards a true zero-tolerance policy. But with the leadership of Senator Gillibrand and our colleagues on both sides of the aisle, we want to just come up for a quick minute and tell you we are going to prosecute this case, this zero-tolerance policy, until we finally get it done. Thank you, Senator Gillibrand.
Thank you. Senator Cruz.
This is a question of justice. We have an obligation to our soldiers, our sailors, our airmen, our Marines to stand up and protect them. There are not many issues that bring together a bipartisan coalition like this. But this is an issue on which we are united. 2 Congresses in a row, a majority of the Senate has voted for change. This will pass. You know, there are 2 objectives, both of which are important. One, preserving good order and discipline in the military. And 2, protecting our servicemen and women from sexual assault. These principles are not in tension. They're in harmony. When our young men and young women are subjected to sexual assault, it undermines good order and discipline. No unit can fight effectively without trust between the soldiers and between the soldiers and their commanders. We've seen our allies, we've seen the United Kingdom, we've seen Canada, we've seen Israel implement similar reforms. Reporting rates have gone up, and it hasn't negatively impacted good order and discipline. Every one of us has an obligation to think about why it is for decades the military struggled with this problem. For decades, the commanders, I believe, are trying in good faith to solve this. They are putting in their best efforts. But what they're doing isn't working. This problem has persisted, and the reason it's persisted, the data show, is far too many victims of sexual assault are afraid to report the assault because they don't trust the current system. This is a common sense reform that makes the prosecuting decisions be made by a professional military prosecutor. It leaves it in the military, but simply leaves it with a prosecutor rather than the immediate commanding officer, who many times may well face a conflict of interest. You know, I've got 2 little girls who are 7 and 4. As I've approached this issue, I've thought about when my daughters come of age, if they choose to step up and serve the country, what rules should be in place to protect my daughters from sexual assault? Our soldiers and sailors and airmen and Marines are brave patriots who voluntarily stand up and say they will risk life and limb to defend our nation. But they don't sign up to be the victims of rape. They don't sign up to be the victims of sexual assault, and we have a solemn obligation to protect them, to put in place a military justice system that protects every single fighting man and woman. I want to finally say that I commend the incredible heroism of Senator Gillibrand. She has led this fight tenaciously in the well of the Senate. There is no one more passionate, one senator after the other, making the case, earning the votes of Democrats, earning the votes of Republicans. I've been proud to stand by her side. For 2 Congresses in a row, I've been proud to stand with many of my colleagues, including Chuck Grassley, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee. Change is coming. Change is coming. It's coming through Congress, and a great many of our colleagues say privately they're very, very close to supporting this. They didn't cast a vote today, but I believe there are a lot more votes to come, and change is coming in January 2017 when a new commander-in-chief will be sworn into office. And whoever that commander-in-chief is, he or she has an obligation to protect all of the men and women serving in the military and ensure that we have a justice system that protects every soldier, sailor, airman, and Marine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. I want to join in expressing my appreciation for Senator Gillibrand and my pride in being part of her team. Change is not only coming, it's happening right now. And in large part, it's happening because of the pressure brought to bear by the continuing efforts of Senator Gillibrand and others of us who are continuing to work on this issue. But it's also coming and happening now because of generational change in the military. New leadership in our United States Armed Forces, new blood that are bringing different attitudes to bear, new leadership and new members of the United States military that have different attitudes. There's a word that summarizes the need for this amendment: retaliation. Because retaliation continues in the military, it is Exhibit A for the need to take these decisions out of the chain of command. And one last point, I see this issue through the eyes of a prosecutor. I served as a prosecutor for 4.5 years as United States Attorney, and then for 20 years as Attorney General, when I saw firsthand the difficulty of making these decisions. Commanders-in-chief should be on the side of this amendment because they simply lack the training and professional experience to make these decisions in a way that will secure convictions and discipline and punishment where it's warranted. And these decisions are difficult even for a prosecutor, even for the trained and experienced prosecutors that we advocate be making these decisions. In these cases, decisions are extraordinarily difficult to evaluate the evidence and to make decisions, so better to have them made by trained, experienced prosecutors whose profession it is to prosecute cases, and let warfighting be done by commanders who are the greatest and most skilled of any in the whole world at that profession, but they're not skilled or experienced in the law. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Blumenthal. Thank you. Any on-topic questions?
Senator Gillibrand, do you think that this vote and this issue will or should be an issue in the 2016 election, Senate and presidential?
Yes.
And do you think voters, say in New Hampshire, should look at House and be like, hey, voted on this?
I think it's an issue certainly for all elected leaders because it's an issue of our role as oversight and our role to provide oversight over the Department of Defense. So I think it's highly relevant. It was an issue in the last election. Several senators were asked what's their position in the last election across the country. So I think it's a presidential issue, and I think it's a general issue for all members of Congress. We are the overseeing body.
Could you talk a little bit about the Pentagon's role in resistance to this measure? And I mean, have you talked to the Secretary of Defense Carter? What kind of conversation have you had? What is his?
I've not talked to Secretary Carter yet, but I will, and I plan to brief him. One of the things I did over the last year to continue to study the issue is I asked for all the documents of sexual assault cases at the 4 largest bases, one for each of the services. And the DoD resisted. It took me a year to get those documents, and only after intervention by Senator Levin as chairman of the committee, as well as the president and others saying we will get you, and the Secretary of Defense at the time saying we will get you your documents. It still took a year. And I was chair of the personnel subcommittee, so I think that delay is outrageous and unacceptable. But I did receive those documents, and I received 1 year, even though I asked for 5. So I reviewed those documents, and that informed me even more of some other problems within the system that we will be tackling over the next year to try to professionalize the system. But about half of those cases, after they were actually reported, withdrew during the prosecution. And that goes to the question of, is there retaliation, or do they have so little faith in the system that after doing the rape kit and after reporting, they still wouldn't proceed to the end of the prosecution? We also realized that more than half of the victims in that population of 107 cases were civilians. And in our DOD estimate, that doesn't count civilians. It's only service members. So there's a whole swath of survivors that are really not getting justice either.
That's an extraordinary statistic, by the way. If you want one statistic that shows the problem, in some ways that's the number. The withdrawal rate after the complaint is filed, after the prosecution begins. She or he is deciding, I've had enough.
Well, I mean, could you characterize a little more the Pentagon's resistance, at least in your view? I mean, what is...
I don't think they're taking this issue serious enough. I think they are trying to placate Congress and are going to yes us to death until we go away. And I do not see them as taking this issue at the level it should. And another statistic that proves that case is the rate of retaliation is unmoved after they've been on notice that we need survivors to be able to come forward and report these cases without being retaliated against. The 2012 rate of retaliation was 62%. The 2014 rate of retaliation was 62%. Unmoved. And even more egregious, not one prosecution of retaliation across the last year. So I don't believe they are taking the issue as seriously as they should, and they should not be resisting the professionalization of the military justice system. They should be embracing it, and they should be implementing it.
Anyone else? What's your next move?
We're going to continue to work on the issue. I'm going to ask for more documents so I could see if I can get the 2014 cases. I'm going to look through those and get more data, more information. I'm going to continue to brief my colleagues. For a lot of the new senators, they didn't have a lot of time to look at the issue. Some of them actually wanted to work on drafting legislation. So I'm going to be working with a lot of the new senators on giving them more information to inform their vote. We will, of course, try to make this change next year in the next year NDAA. And every year we do make changes to the bill, and we do make changes to underlying reforms that are important. So I did a lot of changes in the base bill that are important too. So this is an issue that's going to take a long time to solve, but professionalizing the system is a very important step.
Last one, anyone? Senator, when you said, I think you said this is a failure by the Commander-in-Chief, do you mean President Obama specifically has fallen on this issue?
He promised he would address this issue. He told the nation and his Secretary of Defense and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dempsey, said, we're on the clock. If this isn't fixed in a year, we're going to look at these reforms. Well, a year has long passed, and we haven't seen the kind of changes that we need. Again, with that retaliation rate unmoved, with no prosecutions of retaliation, it's a serious problem. So I expect more, and I expect more leadership. And I'm hopeful for more leadership from the President.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good job.
Yeah.